Well, it's a brave first attempt. You can't expect everything to be sorted out immediately, but I also think that there has been a great amount of overreach. There are plenty of creases that may or may not be possible to iron out, and many of them will surface uh, in the years and decades ahead. Whether it will be a disruptor or not, we'll see later. But does it bring uniformity? Obviously not, because scheduled tribes have been exempted from the purview of this law. They are a substantial portion. Some estimate as much as 17% of the Uttarakhand populace. Now, how can you say it is uniform if 17% are excluded? Today's India has many young men and women who are sure that who are not sure that they want to commit to a lifetime. Many are friends. Sometimes the friendship deepens, sometimes it doesn't deepen. Sometimes they prefer to remain just friends. Sometimes they want to take it further and even live in with each other. Sometimes live-ins happen for the simple reason that uh, they do not want to pay two separate rents, but nothing else is happening. In all such cases, to say that, look, I will register, then the registers will be open to the public. The public can go and then inform my father, uncle, and my third cousins twice removed. That is an unwarranted intrusion on privacy, and there is no compelling state interest to support that intrusion. No, forget staying in Uttarakhand. I think dating apps should possibly have a separate category for Uttarakhand residents, so that
Yes.
if an Uttarakhand resident is living in Noida, for example, then there should be some kind of informed consent before you begin dating them, because that relationship can't go further into anything like a live-in relationship or a marriage unless both parties agree to the registration of the same. So I do see some interesting possibilities in law. Some may boggle the mind, some may seem fictional, but I have no doubt that we are a vast country with many lawyers and many law schools now turning out fresher and fresher graduates. So we will have interesting times ahead.
Hello and a warm welcome to HW News Network, your one stop show, truth be told, for some engaging and thought provoking conversations. Uttarakhand has become the first state in India to implement the Uniform Civil Code, with Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami announcing its full adoption on Monday. In fact, he said that this Uniform Civil Code law is actually a tribute to the framers of the Constitution. But there are lots of controversies around this law in its present form. The questions which everybody is wanting to know the answers of is that, does this Uniform Civil Code incentivize patriarchy? Does it deepen the state control? Does it infringe on the individual choices? Is this what the nation wants? In fact, several people have said that they will challenge the law in its present form. Joining me now this evening is veteran Supreme Court lawyer Sanjay Hegde. Mr. Hegde, thank you so much for joining on HW News. And I don't know how many suggestions really have been taken, when this law was in the process. And now that it has been adopted, people are worried. And how do you really see this law?
Well, it's a brave first attempt. You can't expect everything to be sorted out immediately, but I also think that there has been a great amount of overreach. For instance, the law says that it extends to the whole of the state of Uttarakhand and also applies to residents of Uttarakhand who reside outside the territories to which the code extends.
Yes.
Now you have a Mr. Pant who has gone to Bangalore to work. Technically, this law will now apply to him. Now, section, I think it's 7 of the Act provides that all marriages should be registered, even marriages which have happened before the commencement of the code. And contracted between 26/3/2010 and the commencement of this code. Now he is in Bangalore, and he may have married somebody not even from Uttarakhand, but yet would he have to travel back to Uttarakhand, go and register the marriage? So there are plenty of creases that may or may not be possible to iron out. And many of them will surface in the years and decades ahead. Suppose now the same gentleman who then is of Uttarakhand origin continues to remain in Bangalore, happens to have wife and children out there, children born there, they continue. There is a fight on testamentary succession. Then can somebody take a point 20 years, 30 years later when the issue arises? Oh, no, that marriage is not valid at all, because that marriage ought to have been registered within 4 months of the coming into the force of the code in 2025. It was not registered. It never was a valid marriage. The children are illegitimate. All kinds of questions will come about, and whether they necessarily were to the social good or not, only time can tell. To a
But
certain
let's
extent, just
right.
to a certain extent, all this confusion will remind people of what happened when Assam tried to get the NRC updated. Many people had to then dig out ancient documents or go and find them, and then go to the NRC coordinator, get those documents. And ultimately, what came of that exercise? Nothing really substantial, did it?
No, there is a lot of big talk by the Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami that we are building up facilitation centers, and in the mountainous areas also, if the internet connectivity is not good, you will have people going door to door. But coming point by point, and I'll begin with the personal laws first. That this law, the Uniform Civil Code in the present form, Pushkar Singh Dhami says that this brings uniformity as far as the personal laws are concerned, matters relating to marriage, divorce, succession, and so on and so forth. So, do you really think that it does bring uniformity and it will not be a disruptor in the society of Uttarakhand?
Whether it will be a disruptor or not, we'll see later. But does it bring uniformity? Obviously not, because scheduled tribes have been exempted from the purview of this law. They are a substantial portion. Some estimate as much as 17% of the Uttarakhand populace. Now, how can you say it is uniform if 17% are excluded? And Uttarakhand proudly claims to have a large Hindu majority. So you exclude 17% only to bring in a particular 14% or so that you want to be brought in within the purview of a uniform civil code. So how uniform is your uniform? There's a huge question mark there. And chaos, of course, will come from this extraterritorial operation. I only gave you the example of a Mr. Pant, hypothetical example, who went to Bangalore. Think of a Mrs. Or a Miss Halida Khatun, somewhere born in Uttarakhand, who is married into Uttar Pradesh. Now, the law is technically applicable to her as well. Now, will she drag her husband to Uttarakhand to get a marriage registered?
True. So basically, there's nothing uniform about this law, but then a lot of things are said about the live-in relationships as well. That it deepens the state control. It gets into your personal lives almost. And how do you think that this situation will unfold? And what really makes this scary? Because people have been talking, on that line that this is the scariest of the legislations which one could see, as far as the personal liberties are concerned.
No, there are, see, it allows what in Britain was called the nanny state. Here, it possibly, uh, I'm trying to find a suitable example. In the face of Amrish Puri in uh, Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge comes to mind. It is that kind of overarching, overbearing, patriarchal kind of law which says that, oh, you think you want to live alone. Raj and Simran जी ले अपनी जिंदगी as long as you register a live-in relationship. That is that is the kind of uh, over intrusive legislation that it seems to be. Today's India has many young men and women who are who are not sure that they want to commit to a lifetime. Many are friends. Sometimes the friendship deepens, sometimes it doesn't deepen. Sometimes they prefer to remain just friends. Sometimes they want to take it further and even live in with each other. Sometimes live-ins happen for the simple reason that uh, they do not want to pay two separate rents, but nothing else is happening. In all such cases, to say that, look, I will register, then the registers will be open to the public. The public can go and then inform my father, uncle, and my third cousins twice removed. That is an unwarranted intrusion on privacy, and there is no compelling state interest to support that intrusion.
What do you think is is the biggest danger, when it comes to the live-in relationship, and of course the police misusing it, informing the parents? But according to you, what is the scariest thing in this legislation? And it's bound to get challenged.
No, the scariest thing is the loss of privacy. India does not seem to value privacy all that much as a society, also. Everybody knows everything about everyone else, and at the same point of time, wants to preserve a zone of privacy as far as they are concerned. But here you are requiring registration. After the registration, there is no guarantee on the privacy of the data, and almost anybody can use it for whatever purpose. Some may be rendered vulnerable to blackmail. Some may be rendered vulnerable to parental pressure, and also in the case of interfaith live-in relationships, for instance, you are almost inviting the mob inside. We have often seen that even under the Special Marriages Act, when parties give notice of an intending marriage, and that notice is published by putting up on the notice board of the marriage officer, people from both communities approach the house, the family. They say, can you not find a bride or a groom from the same community? So this we have seen in the practice of ordinary law. This will be all multiplied in this kind of overreaching, overarching legislation, which
Right.
not only interferes in marriage, but in possibly in relationships which do not intend to fructify in marriage.
Right. Also, Mr. Hegde, if you could explain that, I mean, now the Uttarakhand couples, regardless of residency, will have to declare a statement of live-in relationships to the jurisdictional registrar. Now, obviously, it will give more authority to the investigative powers to summon such partners and inform the local police. Now, how is this situation really going to impact the society? Because obviously, things won't be that easy, Though Pushkar Singh Dhami makes it sound as if it's going to be a very simple process, and we are abiding by all the laws, and it's a tribute to the framers of the constitution. So they are intruding into the private lives of the people. At the same time, they are talking about liberty and constitution, which is so antithetical to each other.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, uh, the entire thing is that you have to have a statement of live-in relationship, meaning a jointly signed statement to the effect that a man and a woman are in a live-in relationship or intend to enter into such a relationship, submitted to the registrar in the prescribed manner in accordance with the provisions of part 3. And then also then there will be a statement of termination of such a relationship. So uh, not only the registrars, not only unwarranted bystanders, not only are families impacted, it effectively takes away individual liberty and autonomy. It's not the two people in a relationship alone who can take decisions for themselves. They you To say that you can't contract a relationship without a prior registration of it, and that you can't walk out of a relationship without giving a notice of termination. It almost makes uh, humanhood, whether man or woman, like a tenancy agreement.
Absolutely. But is the law really silent if you've gone through? I'm sure you've gone through the law. And is the law silent on what happens in cases of harassment of such partners by kin, vigilantes, or self appointed champions of Indian culture and tradition? So is the law really silent on that?
Absolutely. The law doesn't contemplate everything. The law lives in a la land which is totally devoid of Indian reality. It thinks that all that is happening is that there will be these very amiable registration officers who will enter the names solemnly in a register, and those registers will forever be sealed but will be used for evidence whenever necessary.
Hmm.
Of course, the law n- does not contemplate any penalties for anyone who misuse the data and uh, details which come out of such registrations.
But as far as the women perspective is concerned, people have been saying that now things like halala or polygamy will not happen, and women will be more at liberty. Women will have choices. From the women's perspective, does the law look progressive or aggressive according to you?
I am not a woman, so I won't be able to comment. But let me put it this way. Let me put it this way. Ex facie progressive. Uh, okay, why should there not be equal rights? That there is the protection that a marriage which is registered cannot be undone by an instant triple talaq. There would have to be a legal process for undoing it. All these, all these definitely are progressive. But what often happens is that when the methodology of the law becomes too cumbersome, people then stop obeying it. It happens in tax, for instance. It happens in many other fields. So, what is most likely to happen, especially after, and it has also happened all over India after the triple talaq law? People then don't bother to divorce their wives. People will simply abandon them, and there is authority from high constitutional offices for that precedent.
Absolutely. But as far as the various sections of this law are concerned, I was reading that out of 389 sections contained in three parts of the code dealing with marriage and divorce and succession and live in relationships, only 14 sections are new. And the bulk of the remaining sections is essentially a work in copy paste from the pre existing laws, such as the Hindu Marriage Act or the Special Marriage Act or the Hindu Succession Act. So, what is so new about it? I'm just not able to understand.
No, but that is common. We recently had the enactment of the Nyaya Samhitas and all that, the criminal code. Almost 80 to 90% was a reiteration of the old law, except that the numbering changed, the entire scheme of the act all changed. So the law progresses like that, where uh, a majority continues as it is, but certain changes or certain reupholstering happens. To that extent, yes. But you see, the what is problematic in this law is that it takes the what is already existent in the Hindu Marriage Act, and then cuts and Marriage Act and the other Succession Act, and cuts and pastes it across all other religions. It does not take into account the differing uh, concepts of marriage among Christianity. In Christianity and in Hinduism, for instance, marriage is a sacrament. In Islam, it's a matter of contract. People contract a marriage, and the form of dissolution of a marriage is very akin to the dissolution of a contract. Today, you bought that kind of contract or a tenancy contract into live-in relationships, and marriages you have all treated it across the board as almost sacramental. Sacramental plus registration, and so therefore to deregister you again go through a legal process.
Right.
You also have not taken into account any of the other aspects of in the various personal laws with regard to succession. You must realize that Hindu women, for instance, or Hindu men also, did not really have the right of divorce before the Hindu Marriage Act came in. It's not as if uh, uh, the Hindus' personal law was either codified or modernized for a very long time before 1956. So now whatever has uh, worked insofar as the majority of the population is concerned is now being sought to be implemented on those which held on to their faiths and their ways of doing things.
Right. But I also want to talk to you about the non-compliance bit, because even the non-compliance isn't easy. And in the event of a non-registration, maybe as far as the live-in relationships are concerned, a fine of 25,000 will be imposed, also a jail term. And everybody is saying that this amount is too high for a country where about 10.84% of the rural population is below the poverty line. So, didn't too much of application of mind happened when this law was made, and all of a sudden you come out with a fine which is amounting to about 25,000? So, is it not like too much? Can this be also challenged?
Well, I have no doubt that various provisions of the law will be challenged on various counts. Now, 25,000, whether it is too high or too low, that again is a matter of, to a certain extent, of economic policy. Courts may not really quibble over the figures, but the very fact as to whether you can uh, uh, criminalize non-registration of your personal relationships, that I think is a debatable question. Uh, the the sections require the sub registrar to first issue a memorandum, and then after that memorandum, uh, if you fail to honor it, it's then that action comes in. So it will also be defendable by it will no doubt be defended by the government advocate, saying that we've provided a procedure which is reasonably just, fair and reasonable. Uh, but the the mere quantum of the amount may not be a question of unconstitutionality.
Right. But Mr. Hegde, what does a law like this generally, how is it really going to pan up? And which are the fields, like say, for example, in the live-in relationships, what happens to the dating apps now? People are questioning whether at all, what is the kind of impact on young teenagers who go out dating and all? What is going to be the impact on them? Will the parents who've had love marriages maybe in 80s and 90s, what is the life going to be for their kids now if they are staying in Uttarakhand?
No, forget staying in Uttarakhand. I think dating apps should possibly have a separate category for Uttarakhand residents, so that
Yes.
if an Uttarakhand resident is living in Noida, for example, then there should be some kind of informed consent before you begin dating them, because that relationship can't go
Hmm.
further into anything like a live-in relationship or a marriage unless both parties agree to the registration of the same. So I do see some interesting possibilities in law. Some may boggle the mind, some may
Hmm.
seem fictional, but I have no doubt that we are a vast country with many lawyers and many law schools now turning out fresher and fresher graduates. So we will have interesting times ahead.
But what is the kind of backlash which you really see? Of course, the law, various provisions, as you said, would be challenged. But what is the backlash or the resistance which you see from the society in Uttarakhand? Will the people stand up enough against this law? Will the parents, maybe the teachers association, or maybe some youth bodies, will they stand up against the law that we are not there to, follow this? What happens then?
Well, I I doubt that there will be uh, organized resistance to the effect to an extent where the lawmakers have to think twice. That can only happen if vast majorities of people are inconvenienced, especially with the questions of registration of post 2010 marriages. Uh, and if that takes time, then there might be organized resistance, but that may possibly be got over by saying, okay, we'll extend the deadline for a few times. That that has happened. You've seen, for instance, with resistance to Aadhaar. There were a lot of people who were holding out earlier, but each time, especially with reference to the linking of the PAN and Aadhaar, those deadlines kept getting extended. Uh, Other resistances can come if there are people who insist that no, tribals should also be included. And supposing tribal women say, why have our rights not been taken care of? That certainly could be an issue. As to whether the minority communities within Uttarakhand would resist this law, I have no information either way.
But do you see the intent of the government? Of course, Uttarakhand government has implemented it, but do you see other BJP rule states coming up with similar laws, which they are already in process of doing that? But do we also see a central legislation on this?
See, in a sense, this is a controlled experiment.
Hmm.
Uh, Uttarakhand being a small state, if if the enactment goes through without too much resistance or without too many hassles in the implementation, it may be that some other states may follow suit to curry favor. And even while the current government is dependent on its allies for a majority in the Rajya Sabha, in the Lok Sabha, and all legislation may not be very easily passed. Therefore, they might prefer to pass it in the states where they have been in power for a long time and are assured of uh, majorities in the assemblies. So maybe after a couple of years of this experiment, we could see further movement. That could be an anticipation.
So then, supposing is a big word here, underlined that after various states have implemented the Uniform Civil Code, and if at all there is a central legislation, so the central legislation will override all these state UCCs, or is it just going to be like one uniform law and the state UCCs will be disbanded? I mean, I'm just not able to fathom as to how it's really going to unfold.
Well, if a central legislation comes in, then that will prevail. Uh, to the If there is a clash between the central and the state legislation, that's the normal law. It's not only in respect of the UCC, in any other legislation also. That is the normal position. But as I told you, that given the current composition of the Lok Sabha and the nature of the allies, it may be unlikely that this Lok Sabha passes any central legislation.
Sir, my last question, your final thoughts to a law which is as regressive as it could have been. And we've discussed all aspects, what are the dangers, what are the challenges? What would you really say towards the end on this Uttarakhand UCC?
It is a political experiment. It is one more measure of the state trying to intrude in the personal lives of its citizens. Whether Indian citizens are and the residents of Uttarakhand are strong enough to tell the state, look, you please control the outside world. Do not get into our internal affairs. That is the big question, which remains to be answered.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hegde. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you, sir.
Stay ahead with our cutting edge news app. Instantly access the latest shorts in just 1 minute and breaking news in just 50 words. Download now for a smarter, faster news experience.